there are award-winning, nationally recognized workplaces here in Lincoln, Nebraska. So I asked several representatives of these companies to speak to us today about how do you design and sustain a great workplace culture. So we have Dan Krick from Lincoln Industries and Randy Hawthorne from Firespring and Larry Sternberg from Talent Plus. So maybe 5 or so-ish minutes apiece, and then we'll take some questions, 5 to 8, and yeah, we'll just go down the line. How's that sound?
Sounds good. Okay, is this on? Good afternoon. So Dan Krick, I work with Lincoln Industries right here in Lincoln. We're a blue-collar, privately held metal manufacturer supply chain management company. If you walk through our facility, you'd see a lot of hard work being performed. We take metal and we polish it and we plate it. It goes on some of America's best brands, Harley Davidson, the nickel chrome you see on those motorcycles, the stacks on Kenworth and Peterbilt trucks. So our work is really hard, difficult, challenging work. And yet, within that environment, we've created a great place to work. In fact, Larry's organization, Talent Plus and Lincoln Industries, for several years now have been recognized on the Fortune list for small to medium-sized companies. And so when we were honored to have the invitation to speak this afternoon, the thing that I think is unique about how we approach this is we know culture is going to exist in an organization whether you're intentional or unintentional. It exists in families, it exists in the school environment, and so what we've said is we're going to be very intentional about it. So I really believe intentionality is the special sauce, and what we've tried to really design is a great workplace. And we've taken the approach that it really does start and end with selection. We really feel like our biggest gift to our people should be that we should select people that they're going to really enjoy working with and not select, for lack of a better, more sophisticated term, jerks, right? So wouldn't it be great if you go in and the 8, 9, 10 hours that you were investing in sharing your talents with every day were people that you'd like to work with? And that's really the approach that we take, because in many companies, the mission and the work of the company is enough to really get motivated. If you're with Mayo Clinic, isn't it amazing? Every day you're going in there and you're part of saving lives for hundreds and thousands of people, and the families are impacted, and you can really feel good about the mission. We take metal parts and we bend them and we plate them and we fabricate them, and that isn't the joy that our people get. The joy that people get is the fact that the team that they're with is doing something together. And they tell us that over and over and over. And yeah, we're a part of some fantastic brands. Harley Davidson, a well-known brand, so popular, people tattoo that logo on their body. But it's really about the relationships. And Dr. Baker was talking about that. So in our case, to forward it on to our next panelist here, for us, it's really about being intentional about culture. And I think the companies that do that well are companies that just excel in so many cases. They have more satisfied people, and the results are better. And there are countless examples. Herb Kelleher did an amazing job with Southwest Airlines, and all he did was he said, I'm going to create a culture that nobody else can compete with. And because of that, Southwest Airlines did amazingly well. So forward it on to my panelist here.
Hi, Randy Hawthorne from Firespring. We're a marketing company in town that works primarily with nonprofit organizations all over the country with their online presence. And I see a few clients out in the audience. Hi. And I think you'll hear this a lot, that we too are very intentional about our workplace. And I'm always honored to sit on panelists with these companies because I highly respect the work that they've done on building a great culture in Lincoln, but we're all very different. Yeah. That's very true. So it's always fun to sit on these panels and talk about this. But I would echo some of the things that were already mentioned in the fact that we are very intentional in our hiring process as well. And it all begins with our 3 core values, and then ensuring that we bring on people that believe in those core values. And you know, we do get to help nonprofits, which is a little bit rewarding in our everyday lives. We know that we're making differences in causes all over the country. But you know, I think we would echo some of the other things that we get to do that with people that we want to do that with. And so, you know, we have a relatively fun culture. We're starting to get into wellness.
That's good. That's good.
Which I'm really excited about. And you know, so I don't want to. I would rather answer questions, so I'm just going to go ahead and pass it on to Larry there.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Larry Sternberg. I am with Talent Plus, and what we do is we study human potential. We study giftedness, aptitude, and we help companies select and develop people who are naturally aligned with the company values. So I agree with what Dan started with, is it all starts with selection. Companies are, as you know, communities of people. And so when you invite somebody to join your community, it's good to have some knowledge ahead of time, the degree to which they naturally fit with the values of the community. Every time you select somebody, you're placing a bet, right? Nobody can be sure, but every time you select somebody, you're placing a bet. So you want to up the odds on the bet. So the first thing you have to do with the intentionality is to be able to describe the ideal culture that you want. And unless you can do that, it becomes very difficult to know whether person A or person B is a better fit for that culture and will thrive in your company. And I'm gonna add a couple of specifics to start off with about how to build a great culture. So you select these people. The next thing you want to do is make sure that the set of responsibilities that you assign to each one of these people allows them to spend most of their time doing something they're good at and enjoy. Because that's one very specific way to build. There's no silver bullet. 3 different cultures sitting up here. We could get Google and other companies that have been recognized for their culture. They're all different. And there's just not one way to do it. So I'm just going to give you a couple of specifics. That's one. Get people spending more and more time in that space where they're doing what they're good at and enjoy. Focus on bringing people into your community who are very caring about each other. You want to build a great culture? Here's a question I ask clients and people who are thinking about becoming clients with Talent Plus. What would your company be like? What would this university be like if every person had a terrific supervisor? So a supervisor who cared about them as a person, a supervisor who invested in them. And I'm going to say one more thing and then I'm going to shut up because I also would rather answer questions or get questions I don't have the answer to. That's okay too. But one more aspect of building a great culture is not just putting a vision statement, mission statement on a wall. It's not just knowing what your values are. It's reinforcing them every single day. And to that end, Talent Plus has an all-employee meeting every morning at 9:30. And if a person isn't actively engaged with a customer or something that is very, very urgent, we all gather in one place. And we're still a small enough company that we can do that. But we all gather in one place at 9:30, and we have our values written down. And every day, we discuss a different value. And when we get to the end of that list, we go back to number 1 and we discuss that, and we keep discussing it. Because public discussion of your values is very important so that we can hold each other accountable to living out those values. And the repetition is very important. If repetition and renewed commitment to living out your values weren't important, you'd only have to go to church once. Right? You'd go to church, somebody would say, here's the values we have, here's how you should live your life, have a nice life.
Save a lot of time.
But guess what? People who want to help us and who are in charge of those institutions know that it's very helpful, all that repetition, when you go to church. So this is what we do every day at Talent Plus. And we have introduced this to a lot of our clients, and in fact, we learned it from a client. We learned it from the world-famous Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company, who does exactly that. And they do it in an organization that runs 3 shifts a day, and you can't get everybody together at the same time because they're not there at the same time. It can be done in any organization. But the public declaration to live out your values and discussion about how to do that helps you build a great culture.
Questions?
You want to repeat it, Nick?
Kind of, how are your core values at your companies derived?
How are they derived? Who decides what the culture is? Who decided what the culture of this university would be? Who decided what the culture of the United States of America would be, if there is one culture? There's numerous cultures, I'm sure people would be quick to point out. To some extent, you can be intentional. And to some extent, every person you bring into the organization changes your culture to some degree. The culture may change the person's behavior to some degree, but the person is also going to bring a new perspective into that culture and may change it. So to some extent, you can be intentional and you can select people who fit. But to some extent, every person who comes in changes it. So there are parts of it that aren't intentional. They emerge.
Yeah, I call that organic. The organic part of being intentional in your culture. But if you select the right people, even though they're going to make an adjustment to the culture when they come into it, it's probably in line with the core values of your company, and I relish those things. You know, we have Nerf guns, very organic. It was Nerf guns that shoot little plastic darts at people.
Harmless ones.
Wow. I've never had to explain that before, and I don't know how.
All you young people, Google it.
But that was a very organic thing. One department started Nerf wars at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And now we give a Nerf gun to everyone that comes in. We want them to be armed, so everyone gets a Nerf gun on their first day. But that was a very organic aspect of the culture.
Sitting right in front of me here is Jim Meehan, who is the most senior analyst at Talent Plus. Jim has spent many, many years thinking about this, and here's another way to think about who decides what the culture is. If I ask Jim to analyze the talent and the characteristics of the C-suite of any organization, he'll tell you what the culture is. Because the people with the most power, whether they articulate their values or not, the culture is going to reflect what they find to be important, what they find to be unimportant, et cetera, et cetera. So it emerges organically in that way as well. So for instance, when we were heavily involved in Ritz-Carlton, and Jim was, one of the aspects of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel Company culture at that time was people were intensely competitive. I mean intensely competitive. And it wasn't because they were intentional about it. It was because the senior executives, that company, were intensely competitive individuals. And that flowed throughout the whole culture. So when we did an analysis of somebody who might want to join from the outside, if they weren't intensely competitive to begin with, they were going to have a difficult time advancing their career against all these other intensely competitive people with whom they were inevitably competing. So the character traits of the senior leaders are going to determine the culture. All right.
You guys have
I
some
have,
great
I have the
work
biggest mouth in the room, so here I go. Have you seen our building, the Town Plus building? Do you know where Cedars is on Pioneers? Okay. So you go up to the corner of Pioneers and 70th. And if you're approaching from this direction and driving on Pioneers from where you're going to hit it here in town, on the left you will see a magnificent white building that is very much not a square box of rooms. And it is a spectacular building. So the founders, Town Plus is a privately held company. The owners of the company have been very intentional about creating a space that is, it's quite beautiful, and the walls are glass. The walls of the offices are all glass. We don't have curtains, so you can stand just about wherever you're standing in this building, you can see outside. It's a really cool deal, and we're all very fortunate to work in there. But I'm going to tell you something. It doesn't, in terms of building a great culture, it helps, but it's not necessary. I spent a great deal of my adult life in the hotel business. And while the hotel is under construction, there's a group of people who are working, and the owner rents the cheapest, crappiest, cheapest per square foot space that you could possibly imagine to put people in what we call the pre-opening offices. And this is the workspace you have. It's the amount of space you have now. So imagine that you were trying to get your work done, and there were people sitting directly in the chairs on either side of you, and this is what you showed up to every day. And maybe the air conditioning didn't work so good and it was hot in the summer. And I will tell you something. People develop an esprit de corps in those pre-opening offices. They develop deep relationships in those pre-opening offices, even though the work conditions are considerably less than ideal. You can have a great culture, no matter what it is. Does it help? Yeah. Is it necessary? No.
And I was going to say that. You know, everyone starts somewhere, and most companies start pretty small, and you work out of closets and boxes, and you work really close with each other. But it's really fun when you can reflect your culture in your environment once you get to that level in your business that you can do that, and do silly things like put a slide in your office because you can. So so then it helps in attracting the types of people that you're looking for eventually. But you know, we all started somewhere. We all started in that crappy square foot bad carpet office.
Yeah. Talent Plus did not start in this building, I can assure you. Talent Plus started in the cheapest square footage available in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I wasn't with Talent Plus in those days, but I visited in those days, so I've been in those offices. They didn't invite people into the office. They did business elsewhere.
Yeah, love your question. Several years ago, a mining company from Colorado reached out to us and asked us if we would be willing to devote a day to help them to build a real strong people-centric culture, one really centered around well-being. And so we said, yeah, come on in. And so they flew into Lincoln, and they said, we've read about you, you're C. Everett Koop, you've won the nation's highest award for well-being and wellness in the workplace. You have this great people-centric culture, and yet here's our situation. Our people work 12-hour shifts, and they go several miles into the earth every day. So we see them at the beginning, and we see them at the end. And we're really wondering, can we have a people-centric culture? Can we have a culture of well-being due to that? They're not sitting in front of terminals. I haven't been into Firespring. I've seen the videos of, an amazing workplace. I've been into Larry's building in Talent Plus. It's amazing. These people go into the ground and they mine for 12 hours and then they come back out. What we decided to do in working with them was, let's not let that be a hurdle to success of creating a great culture. And today, That mining organization we followed, and they've done amazing things. They've been at conferences where we've been on the panels, and now they're speaking about their culture. So they really decided that we're not going to use that as an excuse for creating a wonderful place to work and a culture of well-being. So it's great if you can have what my compadres have here, which are amazing facilities, yet I would go back to the point, you create it one person at a time. If you're intentional about it, you select great people. One of the expectations we have is select like it's a nanny coming into your house for 8 hours while you're away. What would you want to know about that person? Wouldn't you want the very best taking care of your kids? Wouldn't you want the very best to be a part of the organization and the people that you're bringing in? So facilities can be a huge component of a workplace, but I think you'll find both in these organizations, you're going to find the core is the great people. They happen to have the ability now to share the success they've done as a business to be able to have great facilities to support it. But I know for a fact it started with really the values that these organizations were built upon.
Yeah.
Good question.
Based on what the two of you have said, let me just add this. If you're running an organization, you've done your best to select the right people in, they're likely to be a great fit, they're likely to thrive in the culture, you're not going to get it right every time. You've got to spit those people out. Believe it or not, when somebody is not a good fit for the culture, it is not kind to them to leave them in that culture struggling. They know it before you know it. And they're coming to work every day with a knot in their stomach, knowing they don't fit in the culture. And although it's unpleasant and difficult, it's kind to acknowledge that and release them so they can find a culture where they are a good fit. And there's too many supervisors who shy away from that, because the more of those people you allow to stay in your culture, the harder it is to keep the culture the way you want it, and they're not thriving. There is a culture they'll thrive in. It just so happens it's not yours. And when you come to that conclusion, see, what you want to do when you select people, as we've been saying, is say to somebody, you don't have to change to be successful here. Based on what we know about you, we want to bring you into this community and encourage you to become more of who you really are. That's the ideal, right? But when that's not working for somebody, you can try and tell them to change their behavior and change their thought process and change this and change that. But at some point in time, wake up and say, you know what, we've tried and tried and tried. This is not kind to leave the person there. I'd rather help them find a creative company where they can thrive. Why struggle to be someone you're not? Because if it's a straight-laced company and they can't express whatever kind of, there's different kinds of creativity, as we all know. So if they want to express a certain kind of creativity and that company does not welcome it, when you ask somebody to adjust, you're kind of saying, there's something wrong with you. And there's not. It's just not a good fit. So obviously selection helps you avoid those things, but from time to time those things are going to happen. And what I'd rather say to that person is, you know what, you can't be yourself here. Why would you want to struggle with this? Why don't we help you find somewhere where being yourself is what's actually celebrated in that company? Like maybe they want to go to Firespring if they have that kind of creativity.
And I think it's important to know that our workforces are diverse. When you start talking about this culture fit, I think some people will start going, well, then are you all the same kind of people? And it's not at all like that. We're a pretty outgoing company, so a good majority of our people have that gene in them, and it's kind of the nature of marketing a lot of times. But there are a lot of people that would rather curl up in a ball in the corner than work a room. I being one of them, actually. And it's really interesting to me to watch that culture fit work within an environment that's much more outgoing, and how they thrive in that culture, and how they get what they need for their life in a culture that probably from the outside doesn't look like something that they would want to be a part of. But they are a great culture fit. They get there, they do their work. They don't necessarily do all of the, some of the crazy stuff that their coworkers do, but they still thrive and enjoy that work environment. So that's really interesting to me. And I can tell, within an interview process, the ones that are a little bit more quiet, I can go, you're a culture fit, but it's going to be interesting to see how you thrive in this environment. So I don't know. It's interesting.
There are scientific ways to study people's natural abilities. And so, yes, there is a way. And in my opinion, yes, it is dynamic. It's a dance. And I have seen organizations evolve. Well, I'll give you an example out of my history. I was asked by Ritz-Carlton to do an experiment to see if we could run a 5-star hotel through a management model that had never been tried before in the company. It was called self-directed work teams. And self-directed work teams, to oversimplify it, is not merely participative management. It's a power to the people approach where the hourly employees have 51% of the vote about how they're going to run their departments. So the waiters were deciding what was on the menu in the restaurants and things of the sort. And the hourly employees were deciding who was invited into the community without management involvement. And so it was the much talked about but rarely seen paradigm shift. And not everybody who fit the previous culture fit in that culture. So I agree with you. It is dynamic. But we can't always predict how the future culture is going to adjust itself, particularly in a volatile, competitive environment like we have today. Or you get a new CEO, believe me, there are going to be some culture changes in any organization. So we can't always predict the way that's going to go. But we can predict, it is possible to predict the degree to which a person might be able to adjust.